Whenever you love God and believe in God, right? Yes, that makes His kingdom bigger and bigger for all of His believers. And then last week we said His promise last week was Jesus will pray for you. Is Jesus always praying for us and pleading on our behalf to God?
Yeah.
Right? So this week we're going to talk about God's promise that Jesus will use you to build His church. Where is God's church at?
Here.
Here? Is it outside of here?
No.
You know? We're going to learn about that today because just like God's kingdom isn't just in heaven, it's here. God's church isn't just in this building. It's everywhere where His believers are. Okay, so Jesus will use you to build His church. The Bible verse comes from Matthew 16:18, and it says, I will build my church. Guys, are you perfect? Raise your hand if you're perfect. You are perfectly wonderful. Of course, all of you are. But do you do everything absolutely right?
No.
Do we all make mistakes?
Yeah.
We do. Not one of us is perfect. Not even on our very, very best day. We are not perfect. Peter was certainly not perfect. We've heard about Peter last week. Peter believed that was Jesus out on the water, and he said, it's okay, just go sit down. He said, if you're Jesus, then tell me to come out to you. And he did. But what did Peter do? He took his eyes off of Jesus and he started to sink. We know that Peter wasn't perfect. He shouted when he should have been silent. And he was silent when he should have shouted. Peter lost his temper and he lost his courage. You heard about that last week. The other 11 disciples weren't any different. The truth is, they were all just ordinary people. They messed up and they made mistakes, but Jesus didn't ask them to be perfect. He asked them to believe and to obey. And because they did, Jesus used those ordinary people to do extraordinary things. When you choose to believe, He'll use you too. You'll become a part of the church He's promised to build. It's a promise that Jesus first gave to Peter, far from perfect Peter, who became Jesus' building stone. Let's hear the story. This story is from Matthew 16, verses 13 through 20. Jesus turned to His disciples and asked them a question. Who do the people say I am? Emma, what would you say if Jesus asked you, who do you say I am?
The King of all kings.
King of all kings. Connor, what would you say? What would you say if Jesus said, who are you? Who am I? That's a tough question. Well, they were all standing in the middle of the dust and crowds of Caesarea Philippi. It was a very busy place, filled with travelers from all over the world. It was a little bit crazy and wild. It was kind of like an ancient Las Vegas or New York City, all rolled up into one. It was a place where people worshiped fake gods, and they followed false ways. Jesus chose that very place to ask His disciples, who do people say I am? So guys, this question was kind of tough because of where they were at. Imagine that you're sitting in a circle with all of your group of friends, and you say, Hannah, am I your best friend? But all of your other friends are sitting around. Is that hard for Hannah to answer that question? Yeah, well, how do you say she's your best friend? Because then you're going to upset the other people, right? Uh-oh. So Jesus could have waited to ask His question until He was back in Galilee, where the crowds loved and adored and cheered for Him. But He didn't. He asked in this place where there weren't many believers. Jesus chose to ask his question in the wildness of Caesarea Philippi, with all of the stuff of the world trying to steal everyone's attention away from him. Who do the people say I am? He asked. Well, his disciples looked around at the busy city. Some looked down at their sandals or the ground. Were they nervous to answer? Some stroked their beards and stared off into the distance. Well, they began. Some people say that you are John the Baptist. Other people say you are Elijah or Jeremiah or maybe one of the prophets. Then Jesus asked, who do you say I am? So they were giving Jesus the easy answer. They were saying, well, they believe, they might think, but they weren't saying what they believed. Jesus already knew what the world thought of him, but he most wanted to know what his closest friends thought of him. After all, they'd been following him for 2 years now. They'd seen at least a dozen miracles and heard countless sermons. Did they believe that he was who he said he was? Simon Peter may have thought for a while before he said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus must have smiled. You are blessed, Simon, he said. No one on earth taught you that truth. It was my Father in heaven who showed you who I am. And so, you are Peter, which means rock, and I will build my church on this rock. So Peter's name was Simon before. And then Jesus renamed him what?
Peter.
He becomes Peter. Does Jesus do that, and God do that a few times in the Bible? Abram becomes who? Abraham. And Sarai was her name. Abraham's wife. She becomes Sarah. So he says, he renames him Peter, and he says that means rock. Peter was not perfect. He made plenty of mistakes. But Peter believed that Jesus was truly the Son of God. And Jesus used that belief to begin building his church. Who wants to be a part of Jesus' church?
Me.
Raise your hand.
Me.
I do. Peter was an ordinary guy, but he chose to believe the promises of Jesus. One of those promises was given by Jesus when he said, I will build my church. How's he going to build his church, guys? With believers like Peter that are willing to stand up and say, you are the Son of God? Yes. There are 3 beautiful parts to this promise. The first is who does the building? Who's going to build the church?
Jesus.
Right, Jesus. Not us. Jesus is building it. He's in charge and he never fails. The second part of the promise is will. Jesus didn't say, I might build a church or I hope I can build a church. He said, I will build. Once Jesus starts something, you can count on him to finish it. Does God always keep his promises?
Yes.
Always.
Yeah.
The last part of the promise is about what Jesus will build. What is he building?
A church.
A church. Jesus' church. Is it a building?
No.
Is it a big, beautiful building
No.
with gold ceilings?
No.
No. It is simply a gathering of people who believe. Does anybody here believe in Jesus?
Yeah.
Yes. So we are a church. Just right here in this classroom, we are a church. So he, not perfect or problem-free people, but ordinary people who are willing to follow him. When you believe and follow him, you will also become a stone in the building of his church. You might need a little shaping. Sometimes we need glue to hold us in place, but Jesus will use you to build his church. Are you guys ready for your promise?
Yeah.
All right, let me read it one time. I commit to be a part of Jesus' church, and I commit to the truth that unites us. We believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So if you want to help Jesus build his church, you can repeat after me this time. I commit to be a part of Jesus' church. And I commit to the truth that unites us. We believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Let's say a prayer, guys. Bow our heads. Dear Jesus, I'm so thankful that I don't have to be a part of, that I don't have to be perfect to be a part of your church. I just have to agree that you really are the Son of God. Amen.